and I love EARL. I feel privileged enough that I have been to every single EARL since EARL started in 2014. There I am at EARL in 2016, presenting. So beautifully designed slides there, as you can see. I like a nice short presentation title as well, as you kind of saw from the beginning here. There I am in 2018 presenting at EARL, and in 2019 I even have pictures of me up on the screen there as well. That was suggested by a colleague. He said, if you want a picture of somebody scared, I'll just take a picture of you. So he did on his phone. EARL 2020 was interesting for some reason. It looked a little bit like that. For those of you wondering what the cats are, so Mango, who used to run EARL, Mango, who are now Ascent, their logo, their brand ambassador was the cat. Mango was named after the owner's cat. Literally, because at the start, when they said we can't think of a name for our business, they had all these terrible names come through the door, and the person starting the business said we might as well name it after my cat. So they did. So they gave out cats. I have about 50 of those in my house. Most of them are nicked by my son. I keep tripping over them. But this year we got kind of back in person, and that was it. Again, another short title. So all of my talks always have long titles. It's just supposed to baffle the audience, really. The best bit about EARL is not the talks, it's not R, it's not anything like that. It's the EARL events. Well, it's not actually the events themselves, it's how you get to the events. If anyone knows me really well, there's something else I love as well as R, and that is trains and buses. Oh, yes, come on. Who doesn't love a proper London bus? I can't even remember what year that picture was. There's one of the pictures. It's the same picture every year. I love the fact that they lay on old school Routemaster buses to take you probably 1 mile in London to the evening event, just for the sake of riding on one of these buses. It takes about half an hour. You could walk it. You can walk it there and back quicker. But it's just one of the nice things of EARL, and particularly as people come from around the world to come and listen to our talks at EARL. So this is just a really nice little feature. This year's evening event, if this works, this year's event, I want to show you the venue. Come on, video play. I was told the videos might not work, so if it doesn't work, it doesn't. I'm not going to worry too much about it. There you go. This is Drapers Hall. This is apparently where Cromwell lived. I'm showing you this video. Abby's going to be sitting here really jealous. It was always going on at me, why didn't you get me there? But this was the place they held the evening venue, the evening event. And they're always at historic London venues. We've been to the Crown Jewels, we've been to Tower Bridge, we went to the Imperial War Museum with war actors. That was quite interesting one year. And then one year we did cabaret. I remember telling somebody from Germany, well, we always go to historic London venues, and he's in the middle of cabaret with someone breathing fire. He said, oh, so this is a historic London venue, then, is it? It wasn't Marcus, it was another German, obviously. But they're great venues, great events. Okay, so what the heck is EARL? I've been standing here for 5 minutes, I haven't told you what EARL is. It's nothing to do with that. It's also nothing to do with a dodgy old American TV series either. So EARL stands for the enterprise applications of the R language, or it used to be the effective applications of the R language. And you're probably still thinking, what the heck is EARL? What does that mean? It's people that use R in industry, telling you their stories, giving you their case studies. And when I say industry, it could be any industry. We have marketing, we have finance, we had healthcare, we have fashion, we had insurance, we had literally everything. There's so many different industries. And that's the great thing about EARL. People turn up and give you their stories. And I remember when EARL was first announced in 2014, my boss thought this was really clever. Look, they've come up with this fantastic acronym for a conference that they hold at EARL's Court. That's a really good idea. They hold it at EARL's Court, they call it EARL. About 30 seconds later, his dreams were shattered because I said, unfortunately, it's the other end of the district line. Actually at Tower Hill, it's right by Tower Bridge. So who knows why they called it EARL, but it obviously just rang very well at the time. They have 3 talks going on at once at EARL, so there's lots and lots of talks you can go to. And you always think, who's going to be talking at the same time as me? Who am I competing against? Luckily this year I wasn't competing against anybody that special, so obviously everybody came to listen to me. This one over here, obviously no one was going over there to listen to. I didn't hear much applause in the room next door, so obviously went down like a lead balloon. But unfortunately, that means I can't tell you all of the highlights. I can only tell you the highlights of the things that I saw that I found interesting. Marcus can probably tell you some other highlights. At least. Okay, so some highlights from EARL. And we're just going to run through these really quickly. So EARL opened up, John Murdock, who many of you might have seen, he is the chief, what is he called? Chief data reporter. I had to put it on there to make sure I remember. He's the chief data reporter at the Financial Times. I've seen him speak a few times before. And he's one of these people that's just really humble about what he does. He doesn't stand up and say, I know everything, but he's been charting data for the FT for a long time. A lot of the COVID charts that you saw in the Financial Times were produced in R by John. And one of the things he was talking about was how do you create the perfect plot? And I thought this advice, it's just really good advice to give to anybody, that you can put whatever you want on a chart. You can have a beautiful chart with lots of colours and labeling all your points and your data really, really well. But the key thing, the king of that plot is this thing here, the title. If you have a look at what people talk about when they look at a chart, if you look at the number of mentions the plot itself gets, more than double the number of people talk about the title of that plot. So just a really good bit of advice. When you're charting data, make the plot look really good, but make that title tell you or tell your audience what you want them to consume from that chart. And I think that's just a really good, neat bit of advice. You need to tell people what they want to see. You remember, people don't understand data, they don't understand numbers, they want to look at that chart and know instantaneously what that's telling them and what the message they should take away is. Another highlight was the second keynote. When I went up to EARL, so I made sure I got to EARL about an hour early. And that's because, as we all know, the trains from Brighton are, for want of a better word, crap. So I wanted to make sure that I got there before the keynote started. I said to my wife, I've got to get there for Hannah Fry. Said this over dinner one night. She said, Hannah who? And then I stopped talking to her for about 2 hours. Hannah Fry is an absolute legend for those of you that have never seen her speak before. She's a professor. She does a lot of presenting on BBC. You've probably seen her presenting various shows on BBC or on BBC Radio. You've heard her. And she was talking about trouble with automation. Now, this was kind of, I suppose, the inspiration for this talk tonight, because I know full well that the audience here tonight are very interested in this talk. Straight away, when I tweeted this picture, I get a message. So what is the problem with automation? Well, she didn't as such just tell us about the problem with automation. She spoke about automation. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. And we had a couple of little exercises. So I think we're going to play one of these exercises now. So I want all of you in the audience, play along online as well. So I want all of you to imagine right now you're up for trial for a crime. Right? All of you, whatever that crime is, you can make up the crime in your, whatever crime you've committed, make it up in your mind. You are guilty. You are definitely guilty. And I want you to think about, how would you rather be tried? Would you rather it be judge and jury? Or would you rather be tried by a robot? Would you rather a robot decides your fate? Give that some thought for a second. And let's just have a show of hands. Judge and jury. If you want to be tried by a judge and jury, stick your hand in the air. And that is most of the audience. And if you want to be tried by a robot, stick your hand in the air. Nobody. Anyone? Does anybody online want to be tried by a robot? Yeah. Yeah.
Can you have both and then sort of decide?
Yeah, well, so of course, I took a risk playing that game, because if this audience was completely different to the audience at EARL and we didn't get the same result, it would have been interesting. At EARL, we got pretty much the same result. We had about 100-something people there. 3 people wanted to be trialed by a robot. But there's a few things to consider. Everyone wants to be trialed by a human, and for a lot of the time, the reason is that the human's going to show more compassion, they've got more empathy. But there are times when actually it could be better to be trialed by a robot. So, for example, if there have been a lot of guilty verdicts given by the same judge, the same jury, if it's, so a lot of not guilty verdicts, so not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, at some point, these people will find somebody guilty. So, actually, in that sense, you probably want to be tried by the robot, because you've got more of a chance of being found to be not guilty. Now, the other one, this is apparently statistical analysis, and I'm afraid it's bad news for everybody in the room. But statistically, if you're going to be tried, you are much more likely to be found guilty if the local sports team have lost recently. Now, if anyone's following the fortunes of Brighton Hove Football Club, they haven't scored for, is it 3 games now? 3 games of drawing a blank. So, in that sense, living in Brighton's not going to do very well for you at the moment if you're up in court to be tried for a crime in which you're guilty. But there are cases where automation is good. Self-driving cars is a really good example that she touched upon at the end. If you look at car accidents, the self-driving car will have that reaction time that a human beings are really bad with reaction times, which was one of the points that she was trying to get across. So a self-driving car will be able to stop potentially before the impact of a traffic accident could be severe. So there are cases where it's good and there are cases where it's bad. And thankfully that game paid off as well. Other highlights, I tried to get Ethan to come and talk at this event, but hopefully he'll come and talk. He's up in Leeds, he'll talk virtually, but hopefully he'll come and talk to us in January or at some point next year. And he was talking about eye tracking. So he works for Mediacom, which is a large media agency, part of the same group of agencies that I worked for a while ago. And he was talking about eye tracking and where do your eyes go when you look at an ad? And they've done some analysis at Mediacom to try and help optimize and improve the ads that they put out to customers. This was quite interesting for me. Poor guy, he looked about 12, by the way, and he spoke just before a coffee break, and myself and Zach from Datacode, we went and grilled him for half an hour at the coffee break, and I think he was just completely sick of us afterwards. It was a brilliant talk, and he was talking about what's the best way. So things like font size, make things fewer words, bigger fonts, because that's what people are attracted to. Make the picture really engaging. No one's going to look at this. They don't really care. Yes, it's really great. You've got £100 cash back, but it's such tiny font. Who cares? Who knows what that says? I can't even read it. So make that ad engaging by looking at where people's eyes are focused on. They look at pictures. They look at big numbers, big words. And I just thought it was really, again, clever, but also quite simple when you think about the message that sits behind it. We had the government, well, I mean, we tried to have the government talking to us. In fact, Liz Truss apparently pulled the last talk of the conference from the Levelling Up Committee. It was her second day as Prime Minister. And there are probably stats that we shouldn't have seen. In fact, there's probably all sorts of stats that we shouldn't see. And I can't actually believe I'm standing here talking about Liz Truss as an ex-Prime Minister already. But somebody from gov.uk spoke. Now, he didn't talk about government statistics, but I thought that we're in really difficult times at the moment. It's really important. It's really heartwarming to see that the government are keeping track of some of the most important stats within the UK. Cracking, isn't it? But the message behind this talk was a message, Marcus Lovely, you've probably heard it before. The message behind this talk was a message that I often give across to people, and it's that message of reproducibility and automation. So he was talking about how they've used this fine data set as an example, about how they're trying to take things out of Excel, or how they're trying to automate their processes. And it's a really, really big advantage of R. Don't sit there still working in your spreadsheet, stitching together 10 spreadsheets for 5 days to come up with a report that's wrong. Use R to produce your reports automatically and also to make them reproducible again when you need to do it next week, next month, or how often you need to run it. So a really simple message using a really important government data set. I won't talk too much about my talk. I'm just going to give you my favourite slide from my talk. This is some work we did with a client. The client didn't want their numbers to be changed. Carefully just changed the chart by putting an arrow on the axis. But we did some analysis. The talk was about how you can use R, or how you can use media mix modeling within R to optimize your media campaigns. And within this particular example, we could see this is how much they were spending on TV. You can see they were kind of on and off TV in bursts. And we could see here that these red lines are the optimal range. I'll have to kind of bear with me because obviously there's a big thought behind this. But we said to them, you're spending too much. You're spending up here. You should be spending somewhere within these red lines. And they said, okay, well, we'll take your word for it. And we went down. They spent pretty much what they should be spending. And their ROI went up by 37%. So again, just a way of using R to analyze your marketing campaigns. This one's been submitted, I think, for a few different awards. So hopefully one day it'll be an award-winning campaign. But the idea is that R can do lots and lots of different things. I'm just trying to show you different industries that R can work with. As you can tell, it's when I talk, it's always quite jokey, quite jovial. I do want to talk about something quite serious at the end, which is, well, always hard. I'm not a very serious person, so I will be serious for a minute. But at the very end of the conference, so Mohammed, who runs the NHS, or part runs the NHS, R committee. If you haven't checked out the NHS R community, so it's a community of users of R within the NHS environment. So people that analyse data in the NHS. And obviously he gave a very powerful story about, as we all know, the NHS is very broke. The NHS doesn't have a lot of money to do things. And the NHS needs a lot of funding to be able to work within R. This picture here, it's a picture I took from his talk. This was the very first leaflet that was published and given out about the NHS back in 1948. So that was quite powerful enough to be sitting at an R conference and see a copy of the very first leaflet published about the NHS. But the NHS needs more help within R. And in fact, the NHS R community is the NHS R and Python community now, code within Python and R, and they want support. And the message that he gave out in his talk was just very simple. He said if everybody sitting in this room could give one day to the NHS, to the NHS R and Python community, to come and run a training course, to teach people that work with data in the NHS how to use R or Python, that would allow them to be a lot more on top of the game with the data and the analysis that they have to put together. So we, Data Cove as a company, have already, we've pledged our time, we've pledged 4 days next year. But I would urge anybody here, if you code in R and code in Python, they've written all the training courses themselves. You don't have to write it, you have to deliver a pre-written training course. You can do it online, but it will really help the NHS and help the R community. So if you can, please do that. And there we are, really. So we'll be back next year. I hope it might even be back in a slightly different format, but I'm probably not allowed to say that, so I won't say anything more. If it's inspired you to learn R, we do run R training as well. These are some very boring names for our R training courses. I can assure you that they're going to have some very non-boring names very soon, although some of them are a little bit on the edge at the moment, as we've seen this afternoon. We also run, I can't read that word, but we run something else training courses as well. So if you're R or Python curious, do come and talk to us. We'll quite happily help you out and set you on your way with R or Python or whatever language that you want to learn. You can follow us on our socials, we're everywhere.